My name is Margaret Holloway. I'm 78 years old. I raised my only son, Daniel, with everything I had after his father died in a factory accident when Daniel was just 5. We had little, but I made sure he never lacked love, warmth, or opportunity. I worked 2 jobs, skipped meals so he could eat, and even sold my wedding ring to pay for his college application fees. Everything I ever owned I put in his name. My small antique store, the house, the savings. Because I believed he would protect me the same way I once protected him. But one evening, one cold, damp evening in December, I learned that blood is not always thicker than greed. I wasn't supposed to hear what I heard. I had gotten up from bed quietly to check if I'd left the oven on in the kitchen. I walked past the guest room where Daniel and his wife, Clara, were staying for the holidays. The door was slightly ajar. Pause. Not to eavesdrop. No, I'm not that kind of woman, but because I heard my name. She's lived long enough, Clara whispered. If we don't do this now, the will might change again. Froze. My heart jumped into my throat. Daniel's voice followed, colder than the wind outside. We just have to make it look like a fall. No one will question it. She's old. Accidents happen. I didn't drop the glass of water in my hand. I didn't gasp or scream. I simply stepped backward into the hallway shadows and pressed my back against the wall, willing myself not to cry, not to fall apart. They wanted me dead. The child I raised wanted me dead. And I was standing there in my own house listening to them plan it. I didn't know what to do next. Could I confront them? Call the police? Would they believe me? My legs were trembling. I clutched the banister and somehow made it back to my bedroom. But I knew sleep wouldn't come. Not that night. Not anymore. Because the next morning they were going to ask me to go out to the garden. The steps were slippery from the frost. And all they needed was one little push. But before that could happen, I had my own plans to set in motion. Because I wasn't going to die. Not before showing them just who they were dealing with. Now let me tell you how it all began. How love turned to betrayal, and how I uncovered the truth beneath their smiles. But first ask yourself this. What would you do if you heard your own child plotting your death? Just to take what you spent a lifetime building. To be continued. Backhand index pointing right if this story already has your heart racing. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because trust me, this story is only getting started. It all started 3 months before that cold December night, long before whispers of my death floated through my hallway like ghosts. Back then I still believed Daniel loved me. I still believed I was safe under my own roof. Daniel hadn't visited in almost 2 years. He always had an excuse. Work stress, the kids' schooling, Clara's back pain. I never complained. I told myself that's how grown children are. They build their lives and forget that the hands that rocked them are still trembling, still waiting for a simple call. So when he phoned in late September, saying he and Clara wanted to come stay for the holidays, I was overjoyed. I even cried after hanging up. Silly old woman, right? I spent days cleaning the guest room, buying fresh sheets, scrubbing the corners no one even looks at. I stocked the fridge with his childhood favorites, peach cobbler, liver and onions, banana pudding with whipped cream. I was just happy to have my family under one roof again. Clara arrived first. She barely said hello. Walked right past me with her big city boots and her designer scarf, eyes glued to her phone. You look older, she said without looking up. Well, I am older, I laughed, trying to break the tension. It's been 2 years, Clara. She shrugged and said nothing. No hug. No thank you for opening my doors. Just silence and that empty, polished stare. I told myself she was tired. Maybe jet lag. Then Daniel came the next day with the children. Oh, my sweet grandkids, Lucas and Mia. They ran to me screaming, "Grandma!" and wrapped their tiny arms around my waist. That hug almost made me forget how cold Daniel's eyes had become. He kissed my cheek like I was a stranger at a dinner party. I hope you didn't go overboard, Mom, he said, walking past me with a heavy duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Clara needs peace and quiet, not your usual fussing. Smiled. Swallowed the sting. Of course. Whatever makes you all comfortable. But inside something cracked. The next few weeks blurred together in a whirlwind of awkward dinners, cold shoulders and subtle digs. Clara insisted on doing the grocery shopping, but never brought back what I asked for. Daniel spent more time on his laptop than with the children. When I'd suggest a movie night or ask if he wanted to help me in the garden, something we used to love, he'd reply, "Can't, Mom. Got meetings. Maybe later." But later never came. One night, I overheard Clara telling Daniel in the kitchen, "She's getting worse. The memory lapses. The confusion. It's time we start looking at options." "Options?" Daniel asked. "A home," Clara said. My knees buckled slightly at the thought. I had no memory lapses. No confusion. I wasn't sick. I wasn't even tired. But I said nothing. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. I wanted to believe they still loved me. Until one evening I found Clara inside my room, rifling through my drawer. "What are you doing?" I asked, voice shaky but firm. She didn't flinch. "Looking for headache pills," she said without missing a beat. "You weren't in your room and my head is pounding." But I kept my medicine in the hallway cabinet. She knew that. Everyone did. And she wasn't holding her head. She was holding my will. The old one. The one that still named Daniel as the sole beneficiary. Before I changed it. She placed it back slowly, smiled and walked out. From that moment on, I slept with my door locked and a kitchen knife tucked under my mattress. Not because I feared death, but because I finally accepted the truth. I was a burden now. A $sign waiting to drop dead. But there was something they didn't know. I had already visited my lawyer 3 months ago after falling and breaking my wrist in the backyard. That incident made me think about things. About who truly deserved the fruits of my lifetime of labor. About what legacy I wanted to leave behind. Changed the will. I made sure every cent would go where love still existed. Not to the people who saw me as an inconvenience, but to the ones who truly cared. A charity for elderly women who had no one. And a trust for my grandchildren. Only when they turned 30. Daniel and Clara. Nothing. Not a dime. And that, my dear, is when everything changed. Because they were still acting like I hadn't changed it. Because they thought the papers they had in their hands still gave them the key to the kingdom. They didn't know I had already shut the gate. And soon, very soon, I would make sure they knew exactly what that meant. But before I could even begin to plan how to confront them, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. A whisper from the guest room. And what they said next nearly stopped my heart. "Tomorrow. While she's alone in the garden." To be continued. Backhand index pointing right. This story is just beginning. If you're shocked already, drop a comment below. What would you do in Grandma Margaret's shoes? Don't forget to like and subscribe. Next chapter is where things turn dangerous. And deeply personal. I didn't sleep that night. I sat upright in bed, staring at the shadows crawling across the ceiling like they held answers. Every creak in the floorboards made my spine tense. Every car that passed made me clutch my blanket like a shield. I had heard my son and his wife plotting my death with my own ears. "Tomorrow. While she's alone in the garden." The words played over and over in my mind like a broken lullaby turned nightmare. I wanted to believe, desperately, that maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it was about something else. Maybe it wasn't me. But deep down I knew. Daniel's tone wasn't confused or curious. It was decisive. And Clara. She was the one whispering the plan. That wasn't just pillow talk or angry venting. That was strategy. That was a conspiracy. They wanted to push me. Maybe poison me. Maybe stage a fall and say it was an accident. That much frost on the stone steps could break a hip. Or a skull. And they knew I worked in the garden every morning, trimming my roses before breakfast. I had a choice to make. Run. Confront. Or outsmart. And you know what? I chose to outsmart. The next morning I followed my usual routine. I put on my brown cardigan, the same one I always wore when working outside. I grabbed my gloves, my pruning shears, and my knee pad. I walked down the steps slowly, just like always, one hand on the rail. But this time I looked up toward the guest room window. And sure enough, I saw the curtain twitch. I pretended not to notice. I walked into the garden, bent over my lavender bush, and began snipping deadheads, my ears prickling at every sound. I stayed in that same spot for 10 minutes, long enough to keep up the act. Then I quietly stood, placed my shears in the soil, and made my way around the back of the house. There was a large rhododendron bush near the garden shed. I crouched behind it, hidden in the thick green leaves, just as I saw the guest room door slide open upstairs. Clara stepped out onto the balcony. She scanned the garden, then turned and called inside. "She's out there. Looks like she's alone." A few seconds later, Daniel joined her. "She's by the roses?" he asked. "No, the lavender." They both stood in silence for a moment. Clara muttered, "This is our chance." My stomach turned, but I stayed still. I needed to know more. I needed to catch them. "I'll go down," Daniel said. "You just be ready. If she falls wrong, we might need to call an ambulance fast. Just to make it look real." Froze. He really meant it. They weren't just fantasizing. They were going to do it. I waited until they went back inside. Then I tiptoed toward the tool shed, opened the back panel, and pulled out the small audio recorder my late husband had once used to capture bird calls. I clicked record, my fingers shaking. I had a plan now. If they were going to attempt to kill me, I needed more than a hunch. I needed proof. So I did something no one expected from a 78-year-old woman. I played the part of a forgetful, vulnerable old lady. I left doors slightly open. I looked confused when they asked questions. I mumbled more than usual. I even dropped my coffee mug on purpose just to see how they'd react. Clara smiled a little too hard that day. Daniel offered to escort me to the garden the next morning. "Just in case you slip, Mom," he said sweetly. He thought he was slick. He thought I'd walk right into their trap. But I was always one step ahead. That night, I snuck into their room while they were showering, left the recorder under their dresser. It was the only time their guard was down. And what I captured confirmed everything. "We should push it to Saturday," Clara said in a low voice. "Less neighbors around. Less noise. And if she survives?" Daniel asked. "She won't. She's frail. Her heart can't take much." They even discussed what to say to the paramedics. How Daniel would cry on cue. How Clara would pretend to be distraught. "I'll say she was gardening and I just heard her scream," she whispered. "Easy. Press stop." I now had everything I needed. Their voices, their intent, their lies. But the question was, what do I do with it? Do I go to the police? Do I confront them? Or do I wait, play the long game and watch them try, knowing I'd already locked every door to their little fantasy? The next morning, Clara served me breakfast. Eggs, toast, and a glass of orange juice. I noticed something. She was watching me drink. And Daniel wasn't at the table. I held the glass halfway to my lips. And stopped. "Clara," I asked gently, "where's Daniel?" "Oh," she smiled. "He's just grabbing something from the garage." Right then I felt it, my pulse slowing, my vision blurring, my breath tightening. I dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor. She ran to me in mock panic, but behind her mask I saw it. The truth. And I fell backward in my chair. But not before I hit record one more time. To be continued. Backhand index pointing right. Is Grandma Margaret going to make it out alive? Or is this the trap they planned all along? What would you do if you knew your own child poisoned you? Like, comment, and subscribe. Next chapter will leave you breathless. I don't remember hitting the ground. All I remember was the way Clara screamed, so convincingly that if I hadn't known better, I might have thought she actually cared. But her voice wavered just enough, her panic a little too rehearsed. I knew this woman had watched one too many crime dramas. She called for Daniel in a shaky voice that echoed down the hall. "She's on the floor. Daniel, come now." I felt hands on my arms. I heard shuffling, someone dialing a number. "Hello. Yes, I need an ambulance, my mother-in-law." She collapsed, Clara sobbed into the phone. She's not responding. Yes, yes, our address is 382 Mulberry Lane. I blinked slowly, forcing my breathing to stay ragged and shallow. They needed to believe I was unconscious. If I woke too soon, they'd have time to cover their tracks. But if I waited, they might say more. Daniel hovered over me. I could feel his warmth, his breath. What did you put in the juice? He hissed in a low voice. Just enough melatonin to knock her out. Down. The ambulance will say dehydration. She's 78, remember? They won't even test her. My heart pounded against my chest. Not from the drug but from the rage swelling inside me. They thought this was it. They thought this was the beginning of the end. They had no idea I had already forwarded the first audio file to my old friend Sylvia. Retired lawyer, iron-willed and sharp as a blade. Sylvia had instructions. If anything strange happened to me, any hospitalization, fall or injury, she was to release the recordings to the police and my attorney. Not just one file. All of them. I had them time-stamped and labeled. It was a trap. But not for me. For them. The paramedics arrived 10 minutes later. Clara put on her performance, complete with trembling hands and teary eyes. Daniel was quieter. His expression carefully measured. She's been disoriented lately, Clara explained to the EMTs. I made her breakfast and she just collapsed. Please do something. I was wheeled into the ambulance, still playing the part of the frail, unconscious elder. Clara insisted on riding with me while Daniel stayed back with the kids. It was all part of their image, the perfect, caring family. Inside the ambulance, the paramedic checked my vitals. She's stable. Her heart rate's a bit slow. Possibly low blood sugar or fatigue. We'll run tests. Clara clutched my hand like I was her favorite person in the world. Just hang on, Margaret, she whispered. It'll all be over soon. If only she knew how right she was. At the hospital, I was admitted for observation. Once Clara stepped out to take a call, probably to update Daniel on the success of their little plan. I opened my eyes. The nurse blinked in surprise. Ma'am, you're awake. Yes, I rasped. And I need to speak to someone official. I'm in danger. 10 minutes later, a security officer and a social worker arrived. I told them everything. Not just words but evidence. I handed over a USB drive with the audio recordings and the signed affidavit from Sylvia that confirmed my mental competence and fears of attempted harm. The hospital contacted the police. I asked them not to confront Clara just yet. I wanted to go home first. I had one more act to play. The next morning they discharged me. Clara came to pick me up, smiling tightly, probably hoping I had no memory of anything. You gave us such a scare, she said, buckling my seatbelt. Daniel said to tell you he's making your favorite dinner tonight. How sweet of him, I replied, masking the steel beneath my words. That evening, as we sat around the dinner table, I pretended everything was normal. We ate, we chatted, and Clara poured me a glass of wine. I didn't touch it. Instead I stood. I have an announcement, I said. Daniel looked up from his plate. Clara's smile faltered. I've decided to make some changes around here. Legal ones. I've updated my will. I've recorded everything. And I've informed the authorities. Silence. Dead thick silence. Daniel dropped his fork. Clara's eyes widened. What are you talking about? Daniel asked. I pulled out my phone and tapped play. Their voices filled the room. Clear, undeniable, plotting. You poisoned me, I said, my voice shaking now. Not from fear, but from the sheer betrayal of it all. You stood over me and decided I wasn't worth living. My own son. Mom, it's not what you think. No, I snapped, slamming my palm on the table. It's exactly what I think. And the police think so too. They're on their way. Clara stood. You can't prove. I already have. And my lawyer has more. Just then red and blue lights flashed through the window. Daniel sat frozen. Clara began to cry. You were going to kill me for my money, I whispered, tears slipping down my cheeks. The money I earned working double shifts so you could go to college, Daniel. I fed you, clothed you, loved you, and you repaid me with poison. They tried to speak, but the officers entered the room before they could say another word. And as they were handcuffed, as the charges were read out, attempted murder, conspiracy, elder abuse, I stood taller than I had in years. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because what they didn't know was that their arrest was just the beginning of what I had in store for them. To be continued in chapter in the next. Backhand index pointing right. Justice is only beginning to unfold. What would you do if your own children betrayed you like this? Comment your thoughts, subscribe to follow Grandma Margaret's journey, and stay tuned. Next chapter will flip the tables completely. The house felt colder after they were taken away. Not because of the weather, but because of the silence they left behind. A silence soaked in betrayal, lies, and poison. I sat alone at the dinner table, the wine glass still untouched, staring at the empty chairs across from me where my own son and his wife had once plotted to end my life. My hands trembled, not from age, but from the weight of everything I had just survived. Daniel and Clara were in custody now. The detective said they would be formally arraigned the next morning, and I'd likely be called to testify within the next week. There would be press. There would be questions. But the emotional wreckage couldn't be handcuffed and driven away like they had been. I had loved Daniel more than life itself. I gave up everything for him. I turned down marriage proposals after his father died, refused promotions that would have taken me out of state, just so he'd have consistency and comfort. And this was how he repaid me. By conspiring to bury me before I was even in the grave. I didn't cry. Couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I called Sylvia. You were right, I told her. It happened. They tried to drug me. I got it all recorded. The police have it now. There was a pause on the line. Then Sylvia sighed. Margaret, I wish I could say I was surprised. But I've seen it before. Greed turns blood into venom. I want to change everything, I said. The trust. The will. The house. I want to make sure nothing ever touches their hands again. I'll start the paperwork, she said. The next day, I visited the county courthouse with Sylvia and filed a restraining order against Daniel and Clara. I also requested a motion to make my property legally unreachable by either of them, even if they were released on bail. The judge signed it immediately. It felt surreal, filing legal paperwork against the same child I once held in my arms after nightmares. But it had to be done. After the paperwork, I returned home. And that's when it hit me, the grandkids. Lucas and Mia. They were still at school when everything happened. Too young to understand any of this. Too innocent to be caught between a grandmother they loved and the parents who tried to murder her. They were in protective custody for the night, placed temporarily with Clara's cousin while child services evaluated the situation. I called the social worker assigned to the case. I want them, I said. Please. Let them stay with me. You're their grandmother, yes, the woman said. But given the current trauma and pending trial, we'll need to evaluate your stability and safety. Come by any time, I told her. I'll open every drawer. You'll find no secrets here. She agreed to a home visit in 3 days. I had 72 hours to prove that, despite everything, I could still give those children a home. But those 3 days were filled with haunting memories. I found Clara's diary tucked under the guest bed. Inside were scribbled thoughts in sharp, angry letters. She's lived long enough. If Daniel won't stand up to her, I will. We need the money. I deserve that money. Page after page, she painted me as a tyrant. A selfish, controlling old woman who refused to let go of the empire. I ran a small antique store for 30 years and paid off my modest house in monthly drips of sacrifice. That was the empire she spoke of. Still, I saved every page of that journal and handed it to the police. By the time the home visit arrived, I had cleaned the house from top to bottom. Not to impress them, but to make it feel like a home again. Warm, safe, full of peace, not plotting. Lucas and Mia arrived that afternoon with a child protection officer. Their faces lit up when they saw me. Grandma! they cried, running into my arms. I knelt and held them both tightly. Are you okay? Mia asked, her small hand on my cheek. Where's Mom and Dad? I looked at the officer. She nodded slightly. They're away for a little while, I said softly. But you're safe now. You'll always be safe with me. Lucas looked confused. Did we do something bad? No, sweet boy. Not at all, I said, kissing his forehead. You're the reason I'm still here. The officer observed quietly, taking notes. Before she left, she turned to me. We'll conduct a few more interviews, but I believe the children are safest with you. Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. I tucked the kids into bed, made them cocoa, and sat in my favorite chair, listening to the silence. But just as I was about to rest, the phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Margaret, a hoarse voice whispered. This isn't over. You ruined our lives. But I promise, you'll regret it. Blick. It was Clara. Somehow, even behind bars, she'd found a way to reach me. And in that moment I knew. They hadn't given up. They were still coming for me. To be continued. Backhand index pointing right. What would you do if the same people who tried to kill you were still trying to destroy your life even after justice began? Let me know in the comments, like this video and subscribe. Next chapter is where Grandma Margaret truly starts fighting back. Don't miss it. I stood there, holding the phone like it had burned my palm. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, but I couldn't move. Not right away. Clara's voice, the cold promise in it, cut deeper than any knife. You'll regret it. What more could they possibly do? From jail. I finally lowered the phone and walked back to my seat by the fireplace. My cocoa had gone cold. The peaceful silence that had filled the house just minutes earlier now felt invaded. Polluted. They were behind bars. Yet I still wasn't safe. That night I barely slept. My thoughts were racing. What if she had contacts outside? What if Daniel had written someone into their scheme? What if my home, the only fortress I had left, was still under siege? By morning, I knew I couldn't just sit and wait. Called Sylvia. She called me, I said. There was a pause on the other end. From jail? Yes. She threatened me. Said this isn't over. Sylvia exhaled hard. We'll notify the prison immediately. That's a violation of protective boundaries. If she has access to a phone, someone's helping her. Later that day, I filed an official report with the county sheriff. They promised to investigate the call, trace it, and identify who allowed an inmate under attempted murder charges to access a phone without monitoring. While I waited for answers, I turned my attention back to protecting what mattered most. Lucas and Mia. The children were doing their best to adjust. But I could see it in their eyes. The questions they were too afraid to ask. The uneasiness when the doorbell rang. The silence when Clara's name came up. I sat them down that evening. Your mommy and daddy are dealing with some things, I said carefully. And I want you to know that I'll do everything I can to keep you safe, happy, and loved. Mia reached over and squeezed my hand. We don't want to go anywhere else, Grandma. You won't, I whispered. The next morning, I found a note slipped through my mail slot. No envelope. Just a torn piece of lined paper. No signature. Stay quiet or the children will pay. I staggered back, pressing my hand to my chest. The handwriting was familiar. Clara's. I'd seen that looping and crooked R in the pages of her diary. I immediately reported the threat to the police. An officer came by, took the note, and added it to the growing list of evidence. But fear began to bloom inside me like poison ivy. They were still pulling strings from inside that cell. Later that day, while cleaning out the garage, I found a strange device tucked behind an old box of Christmas decorations. It was a camera, small, black, wireless, still blinking red. My blood turned to ice. Had they been watching me before the poisoning? Planning every step, every move? Was this how they tracked when I gardened? When I napped? When I left the house? I brought the device to Sylvia, who connected me with a private tech investigator. He confirmed it was active. linked to a cloud account. Sylvia's face hardened. They didn't just want your money, Margaret. They wanted your life. Every part of it. I sat in her office for hours, going over every detail, every forgotten conversation, every strange package, every locked drawer I found slightly ajar. We pieced together a web of their deception that stretched back months. Clara had visited the house once alone under the guise of dropping off gifts for the kids, back when they were too busy to come. I now realized she had installed surveillance, spied on me, maybe even poisoned my food in small doses to fabricate signs of confusion and decline. Daniel had been digging too. I found printouts in the trash can from weeks ago. Health insurance policies, estate planning documents, end-of-life care options. They weren't just planning. They were executing. They wanted to paint me as mentally unwell, vulnerable, disposable, and they nearly succeeded. But now the truth was stacking up higher than they could bury. I returned home that evening exhausted, only to find a man sitting on my porch. "Mrs. Holloway?" he asked. "Yes." He handed me a letter. "I'm from the probate office. Your son attempted to file a motion to freeze your assets 2 months ago." "What?" I blinked. "Yes, ma'am. It was denied because the documents were unsigned. But we're required to inform you as the owner of record." He cited mental incompetence. I took the paper, my hands trembling. Daniel had tried to declare me incompetent. Before the poisoning. Before the garden. He was laying the groundwork to strip me of everything, while still smiling in my face. I thanked the officer and went inside. I looked around my home, the same home I built with love, sacrifice, and memories. And I realized something terrifying. Daniel and Clara hadn't just tried to kill me once. This had been layered, planned, researched, practiced. I wasn't dealing with desperation. I was dealing with calculated evil. But now I had every piece of their puzzle, and I was about to make it public. The next morning I scheduled a press conference with the help of Sylvia and a victims' rights advocacy group. I wasn't doing it for pity. I was doing it for justice. For other women like me. For elders who'd been treated like trash once they outlived their usefulness. On the day of the conference, I stood at the podium. Cameras flashed. Reporters held mics toward my face. I cleared my throat and spoke into the microphone. "My name is Margaret Holloway. I'm 78 years old. My son and his wife tried to kill me. For my inheritance." Gasps echoed across the room. I trusted them. I loved them. And they nearly buried me. But I lived. And now I'm speaking, not just for myself, but for every mother, grandmother, and elderly woman who's been cast aside, abused, or forgotten. This ends now. Applause erupted. But just as I stepped away from the podium, a woman in the crowd stood up, holding her phone high. "I have a video," she shouted. "From inside the jail. Clara's not done. You need to see this." To be continued in the next chapter. Backhand index pointing right. Grandma Margaret just went public. But what secret footage did that woman capture? Is Clara pulling strings from the inside? Comment your thoughts below, hit that like button and subscribe. Next chapter is the bombshell reveal. Don't miss it. The woman's voice cut through the room like a razor. "I have a video. From inside the jail." For a second, all I heard was static. The stunned silence that always follows the sound of something dangerous. Reporters turned toward her, cameras swiveled, microphones darted in her direction. My heart pounded in my chest. I didn't know who she was, but her eyes were locked on mine, not in malice but in urgency. "My name is Gina Myers," she said, stepping forward. "My sister's a corrections officer at the county jail. 2 nights ago, she recorded something that disturbed her. She didn't know what to do with it. Until she saw your story on the news this morning." Gina pulled out her phone and tapped a video. The screen illuminated, and the room went dead quiet. The footage was grainy but clear enough. There, in an orange jumpsuit and slicked back hair, sat Clara, in the inmate phone booth. But she wasn't calling a lawyer. She was talking to someone on the outside. Man. His face was turned away from the camera. "She's playing the victim," Clara hissed into the phone. "But we've got leverage. The kids. She can't protect them forever." The man nodded. "We wait till this blows over," Clara continued. "Then you know what to do. Use her age, her memory, twist it, make her look unhinged." "She went to the press," the man said. "Then we go to war." The video cut off. Gasps erupted across the room. Reporters shouted questions, snapping photos, pushing forward. I couldn't breathe. Not because of fear, but because even in a cage, Clara was still plotting. I turned to Gina, stunned. Who was she talking to? Gina looked down. "That's what we don't know yet. But my sister's willing to testify. She says Clara has guards slipping her phones in exchange for money wired from hidden accounts. There's a whole smuggling ring inside." Sylvia stepped up beside me, whispering in my ear. "This is bigger than we thought. Clara isn't just manipulative, she's connected." For the first time I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Rage. Pure burning rage. Clara had mocked me, threatened me. And now she was coming for the only pure things left in my life. Lucas and Mia. Well, not again. I left the press conference immediately, declining all questions, and drove straight to the Child Protection Office. I demanded an urgent meeting. "They're not safe," I said, nearly in tears. "I need full guardianship now. Permanent custody. I need protection orders in place." The officer listened carefully, her brows furrowed. "I've seen your case. You've been through a nightmare," she said softly. "And if that video's real, then yes, you're in danger. All of you." By the end of the day, I was granted emergency guardianship. Lucas and Mia were mine now. Legally. Fully. And no one, not even Clara's evil ghost of a plan, could take them from me. I returned home, hugged the kids tighter than ever, and told them they didn't have to worry about anything anymore. But I knew I couldn't relax just yet. Because Clara wasn't the only piece on the board. That night, after tucking the kids in, I reviewed every file Sylvia had compiled. Financial accounts, phone logs, visitor records, anything that could lead us to the man in the video. Then something caught my eye. A deposit of $25,000 into Clara's account a week before their arrest. From an anonymous business entity. Sylvia traced it. "Sweet Lord," she muttered. "Margaret. The deposit came from a shell corporation." "Whose?" asked. Sylvia turned the laptop around slowly. "Daniel's name is on the paperwork." My mouth went dry. "What?" "He wired her money from a company he set up 6 months ago. This wasn't just Clara's doing. He was planning for her arrest. He knew they might fail. So he prepared a fallback." I slumped back in my chair. Daniel hadn't gone silent. He'd gone strategic. From his own cell, he was building escape routes, setting up digital pipelines, and funneling hush money to whoever Clara needed. I had underestimated him. Badly. The next day, Sylvia filed motions to freeze all shell accounts. I filed for a full criminal investigation into both Daniel and Clara's finances. But just as we thought we were ahead, fire broke out. My antique shop. My phone rang at 3:41 a.m. "Mrs. Holloway," the officer said. "Your store, it's gone." There was nothing we could do. "We believe it was arson." I dropped the phone. I had spent 30 years building that shop. It wasn't just my livelihood, it was my sanity. Photos of my late husband. Notes from customers. Items from every stage of my life. Reduced to ash. That morning a letter arrived in the mail. "This is just the beginning. Drop the charges or next time it won't be a shop. It'll be your home." There was no return address. The gloves were off now. And I was done playing defense. They wanted war. They'd get one. Because I may be 78. But I've got nothing left to lose. To be continued in the next chapter. Backhand index pointing right. Can Grandma Margaret survive this full-scale attack? Is Daniel still pulling strings from behind bars? If you were her, would you keep fighting or disappear? Let me know in the comments, like this video and subscribe. Next chapter is when she fights back, for good. The flames had barely cooled when I stood in front of the blackened shell of my antique shop. Charred beams, broken glass, and memories reduced to soot. My late husband, John, had helped lay the very foundation with his bare hands. We'd opened the place when Daniel was just 8 years old. That shop had been more than a business. It was my pride, my independence. It had helped me send Daniel to college. It had helped me survive grief, recession, and widowhood. And now it was gone. Purpose. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Holloway," the fire marshal told me gently. "There's no question it was arson. Someone doused the back exit in gasoline and lit it from the alley." "Any prints?" asked, my voice dry. He shook his head. "Wiped clean. But whoever did this knew what they were doing." I nodded slowly, keeping the tears back. I had no room left to cry. I had war to prepare for. When I got home, I hugged Lucas and Mia tightly. I didn't tell them what happened, just that the shop caught fire, and I would be home with them more now. They didn't need to carry the weight of this hate. Not yet. Later that evening, Sylvia and I met in my kitchen, legal pads stacked in front of us, folders open like battle plans. "This is coordinated," she said. "The call, the note, the fire. They're escalating. Which means they're getting desperate. I want it all out," I told her. "Every account. Every dollar. Every secret Daniel and Clara ever buried. Bring it into the light." Sylvia smiled grimly. "Then you'll need someone who plays dirty." And that's when she introduced me to Malcolm, a former cyber forensic investigator. Young, brash, brilliant. He didn't wear suits or shake hands. He just nodded at me and opened his laptop. "Give me 72 hours, he said, "and I'll crack whatever they're hiding." True to his word, Malcolm dove deep into Daniel and Clara's past. Offshore accounts, real estate flips, hidden storage unit, even evidence of insurance fraud tied to Clara's previous job. By the third day he had everything. "These two are crooks, Mrs. Holloway," he said, eyes scanning the code. "Your son's been laundering money through side businesses in Clara's name for years. Clara's been wiring small sums to people in town, maybe to keep them quiet, or maybe to get them to act on her behalf." He looked up at me. "They didn't just try to kill you. They tried to erase you, so they could rebuild your legacy in their own names." I leaned forward. "Can you prove it in court?" He smiled. "Better. I can prove it in the media." That's when the second press conference was called. But this time it wasn't just about my survival. It was about their destruction. We presented financial documents, transaction logs, hidden recordings, even voice messages Daniel had left on an encrypted app, messages Malcolm recovered using digital fingerprinting. "Make sure the kids stay close," Daniel's voice said in one. "If she goes down, the estate's ours by default." Reporters gasped. News vans lined my street for hours. The narrative had shifted. This wasn't just elder abuse. This was a crime ring. By evening, it was trending nationwide. Son and daughter-in-law charged in attempted murder and multi-state fraud targeting 78-year-old widow. Daniel and Clara were denied bail. The court declared them a danger to the victim and to the children. But just when I thought it was over, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside were two things. A photo of Lucas and Mia playing in the front yard, taken that morning. A note that read, "The system can't protect you forever." My knees nearly gave out. I ran inside, locked every door, and called the police. They swept the property and confirmed someone had been lurking with a camera lens across the street. Malcolm traced the photo's digital imprint. It had been printed at a drugstore 2 towns away. Surveillance footage from the store revealed a man in a hoodie. Unidentifiable. But then came the twist. That night, Sylvia called me with news from the DA's office. "They want to offer Daniel a deal," she said. "Full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. They think he'll flip on Clara." I was stunned. "Do you think he'll take it?" "He's desperate," she said. And he knows the ship is sinking. Sure enough, Daniel caved. From behind a glass window at the detention center. He admitted it all. I didn't think she'd survive, he said, eyes bloodshot. Clara said it would be fast. We were in debt. I thought we'd just speed up the inevitable. I said nothing. I just stared at the boy I once nursed through chickenpox, the man I sent to grad school. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. I really am. Not as sorry as you'll be, I replied coldly. His testimony led to a complete shutdown of Clara's operation. The prison guard who gave her the phone was arrested. The burner account she used to hire the man who torched my shop was frozen. Police tracked him down in a motel across state lines. They found his burner phone. And on it was a final message from Clara. Finish it. Or I'll finish you. But it was too late. They had all the proof they needed. Both Daniel and Clara were charged with multiple counts: attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy, witness intimidation, and arson. I was asked to give a statement at sentencing. So I did. I stood in front of the courtroom, my cane in one hand, and the photo of my grandkids in the other. This isn't just about me, I said. This is about every older woman who has ever been betrayed by the very people she gave everything to. We are not disposable. We are not burdens. And we are not helpless. Clara sat stone-faced. Daniel sobbed. The judge sentenced them both to over 30 years. When I walked out of that courthouse, the sun hit my face, and for the first time in months, felt safe. But there's one more thing you should know. A letter arrived this morning. No envelope. Just one sentence. You won this time. But we're not the only ones watching. To be continued in the next chapter. Backhand and X pointing right just when Margaret finds peace. A new shadow emerges. Who else has been watching her? Could another threat be rising? Like, comment, and subscribe, because next chapter takes a chilling turn. You won't want to miss it. The moment I read that sentence. You won this time. But we're not the only ones watching. A coldness spread through my body that no blanket could fix. I turned the paper over. No name. No smudge. No fingerprint. Just a clean message slipped into my mailbox like a whisper of doom. I sat on the porch for a long time, holding the note in my trembling hands. I thought the war was over. Clara and Daniel were locked away. The charges had stuck. The children were safe under my guardianship. The shop was gone, yes, but I had survived. I had rebuilt what mattered. But now this was something else. Someone else. I handed the note to Malcolm that evening. He scanned it under a UV light, ran a test on the ink, and even checked the fold lines. No prints, he said. But the paper. It's from a private press. Only used by boutique legal firms and high-end corporate offices. Whoever sent this had resources. Sylvia joined us shortly after. She looked over the note, her jaw tightening. I'm starting to think Daniel and Clara weren't acting alone, she said. And blinked. You mean, someone else wanted me gone? She nodded. Or someone else stood to gain if you disappeared. A sinking feeling clawed at my chest. You remember that shell corporation Daniel created? Malcolm said. I dug a little deeper into it this week. It's tied to 3 others. Dummy entities under one umbrella. They're laundering funds through art auctions and fake charities. For what? Asked. Real estate, Malcolm replied. Prime rural land. Properties owned by widows, the elderly. People who live alone. People who won't fight back. Froze. They've done this before. 4 times that we know of, he said. And I think your case was supposed to be the 5th. My heart dropped. Daniel and Clara weren't just greedy children. They were recruits, puppets, used by something bigger. The next day, Sylvia drove us to the county records office, where we began pulling deeds and wills of the 4 other victims Malcolm had flagged. All of them elderly. All of them passed away, suddenly. All had their estates transferred, in probate confusion, to the same management company. One name appeared on every transaction. The Darbridge Group. A sleek, hidden investor firm based 3 counties away. No website. No public contacts. No obvious wrongdoing. But they were behind it all. Sylvia looked at me, her face pale. Margaret, I think Daniel was working with these people. Clara too. You were just their next target. My knees went weak. It hadn't been personal. Not to them. I was just business. Back at home, I pored over the files Malcolm had compiled. One document stood out. An email chain between Daniel and someone simply named C. The last message read, "If she resists, we proceed with Plan C. Then the trust comes directly to us. Make sure she doesn't have time to rewrite it again. Clara." Well, Malcolm zoomed in on the metadata. The email had originated from an address within the Darbridge group. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That night I sat with Lucas and Mia in the living room watching cartoons. They giggled as the characters bounced across the screen, but I couldn't take my eyes off the windows. Every passing car. Every creak in the floorboards. I no longer trusted the quiet. I didn't tell the children what was happening. They'd lost enough innocence already. But I started taking precautions. New security cameras. A silent panic button by my bedside. A neighbor on speed dial. Sylvia hired a private guard to sit in an unmarked car down the street. Then, on the 3rd night after receiving that letter, the power went out. At exactly 1:43 a.m. No storm. No warning. Just darkness. I sat up in bed, the hair on my arms rising. My house had never felt so still. Then tap, tap, tap on the front window. 3 soft taps. I crawled to the hallway, my old knees screaming, and peeked from behind the curtain. Car idled across the street. Headlights off. No plates. I pressed the panic button. 5 minutes later, police arrived, but the car was gone. All that remained was another note taped to my mailbox. This one read, "Back off, or you'll disappear just like the others." Sylvia went into overdrive. By morning, she had filed for federal oversight. She contacted the district attorney, the FBI, even a few trusted journalists from her old law school days. "This isn't just an elder abuse case anymore," she said. "This is organized crime. Murder for inheritance." 2 days later, the FBI visited my home. They took all our files. All our notes. They asked me to recount everything. From the moment Clara first stepped foot in my house to the latest letter on my doorstep. They didn't say much. But one of the agents, a woman with kind eyes and a scar on her chin, looked me in the eye before leaving. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. What you've done might stop something we've been chasing for years." He nodded. But I was exhausted. And scared. Because I knew this group. This Darbridge group. They wouldn't go down without a fight. And I had to keep my grandchildren safe at all costs. That same night, as I rocked Mia to sleep, she looked up at me and said, "Grandma, when are the scary people going away?" I kissed her forehead. "Soon, baby," I whispered. "Very soon." But I didn't sleep that night. 'Cause I knew deep down, before this was over, someone would try again. Someone always does. And this time, I'd be ready. To be continued in the next chapter. Backhand index pointing right. Next chapter is the finale. Will Grandma Margaret finally bring down the Darbridge group? Or will the shadows strike again? Like, comment, and subscribe. Next chapter will leave you breathless. They came for me at dawn. Not with guns or fire. Not with threats or notes. They came with silence. The kind that creeps beneath your doors. The kind that tiptoes in when you're too tired to watch every corner. It was 4:26 a.m. I had fallen asleep in my rocking chair with Lucas on the couch and Mia curled up next to me under my old quilt. The house was dim, but the porch light flickered faintly through the curtains. Then a sound. Click. Barely audible. The front door handle. I'd changed the locks after the last threat. But someone had found a way. Soft creak followed. I opened my eyes. Shadows moved in the hallway. Every instinct inside me screamed to act. Not for myself but for the children. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I reached for the panic button. this time wired directly to a federal agent stationed less than 2 blocks away. Then I stood calmly and flipped on the living room lamp. The light stung my eyes, but it also lit up the figure now standing frozen in the hallway. A man in all black, face partially hidden behind a mask. He stared at me. I stared back. "You shouldn't be awake," he muttered, stepping forward. "You shouldn't be here," I said. Behind him, 2 more figures slipped through the front door. One carried something metal. The other carried a phone. But before a single one of them could step further, red and blue lights exploded through the windows. "FBI! Drop your weapons!" Agents flooded in. Chaos erupted. I shielded Lucas and Mia as the men were tackled to the ground. Screams. The sound of zip ties. The smell of sweat and gun oil. Then silence. I looked up and met the eyes of the female agent with the scar, Agent Reed. She crouched next to me. "You did good," she said. "They took the bait." "Bait?" I whispered. "You." The entire past week had been a setup. The FBI had traced the shell companies, confirmed the Darbridge Group's involvement in 5 elder murders across 3 states, and learned of a 6th target, me. But they needed them to act. They needed me to play scared, to stay put, to let them think I was vulnerable, still alone, still unsure. The final note, "We're not the only ones watching," was intercepted. Gave them the window. "We bugged your mailbox. We watched the roads. But we needed one more piece," Agent Reed said. "We needed them to come for you directly." I looked down at Lucas and Mia, who were now holding each other but surprisingly calm, like they somehow understood they were safe now. "They almost did," I said quietly. The men were dragged out. One of them screamed something about being paid to scare, not to kill. Another muttered, "We were just cleaners." But their phones were seized. Inside one was a text thread titled, "Instructions from D." And attached were files. Dozens of them. Elder profiles, addresses, medical histories, estate documents, and beside each notes, "Son is hesitant, offer 10%. No heirs, proceed without family. House near zoning project, valuable." And at the top of the list, "Margaret Holloway, high value. Full transfer expected within 6 months. I almost threw up. They had mapped my life like a business transaction. But the game was over now. Over the next 48 hours, federal charges were announced. 26 arrests were made across 5 states. Several attorneys, corporate officers, and estate consultants were taken in. And the Darbridge Group, dismantled. Completely. The news flooded the networks. National inheritance crime ring exposed. Elderly targets saved by brave widow. I didn't care for the attention. But I cared that no more grandmothers would go to sleep with locks and knives under their pillows. I cared that no more trusted children would be the enemy in the dark. A week later, Sylvia came by with final papers. Lucas and Mia were now under my full legal guardianship, with all the protections the state could offer. I'd also been granted restitution from the Darbridge Group's seized assets. Millions of dollars. Enough to rebuild the shop. Enough to start again. But that wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was the peace. That night I took the children to the backyard. We sat under the stars. Lucas leaned against my arm. "Are the bad people all gone now?" I smiled softly. "Yes, baby. They're gone." Mia looked up at the sky. "Are you gonna sell the new house and run again if they come back?" I shook my head. "No. This time we're staying. And this time we own every piece of it." We sat there quietly for a while, the wind gentle against our faces. I had been betrayed. I had been hunted. But I survived. And not just that, I fought back. I may be 78. But I had finally learned. There is nothing more dangerous than a woman with a story, a plan, and nothing left to lose. And now, I had everything to protect. And no one would ever take it from me again. Backhand index pointing right. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of the quiet strength we all carry, and showed you the true power of standing up, even at your lowest, Please like, comment your thoughts and subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to remember. It's never too late to fight back. Your voice matters. Your life matters.